let's talk about feats as it pertains to 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. It is Tuesday, so let's talk about my top 10 D&D 5e feats. So if you want to see what those are and the rules concerning them, stay tuned. I'd make a feat don't fail me now quote, but that's actually a pretty popular DM's Guild book. Anyway, folks, hi, I'm Ted from Nerd Immersion, and welcome to another Top 10 Tuesday. This time, I'll be giving you my top 10 feats for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. The only rule associated with that is it needs to be an official feat from 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. For the purposes of this, I'm going to exclude all Unearthed Arcana feats, and realistically, I may be making an updated version of this video in about 2 months when Tasha's Cauldron of Everything comes out. But I thought it would be good to kind of get this on the record now, so that way I can also see how much things change after Tasha's Cauldron of Everything comes out. Are there big adjustments for all of these kind of top 10 videos? So let's see what they are and dive right in. Number 10. I feel this goes without saying, but I happen to find myself saying it every time because it comes up. This is not necessarily a list of the most powerful feats, the best feats, the worst feats. This is my top 10 list of my top 10 feats. Some of them, yes, are high on the power scale, and some of them are not. It's an opinion. Here we go. So number 10 is Dwarven Fortitude, and I put this one on the list. I've never actually seen anyone take it, but I really like it in theory. And that's why I put it on the list, because maybe, just maybe, one of you has a great story out there, and that's what I'm hoping for. And let's talk. So, first of all, it increases your Constitution score +1, which is good. I like the feats that give you a +1 to a stat, because then they also give you something else, so you don't feel like you totally lose out on skipping the ability score. But it's whenever you take the dodge action in combat, you can spend 1 hit die to heal yourself. Roll the die, add your Constitution modifier, and you regain a number of hit points equal to the total minimum of 1. So I've never, again, used this or really gotten a chance to play too many dwarves, or really any dwarves, to figure out if I really enjoyed this. But I guess you could have a lot of fun with this if you are a certain class and have like a certain build, right? Like maybe if you're a rogue and you can dodge every round as a bonus action, you could dodge every round as a bonus action and then also use that to heal yourself. And I guess in theory, if you have that one necklace, what is it? Not maybe wound closure, I forget, whatever it is, it doubles the hit points you heal when you spend a hit die or something like that. So maybe combined with that, you can be a pretty self-sufficient healer every round as a bonus action. I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below. What are your best examples of use of Dwarven Fortitude as a feat? I'm sure somebody's got some crazy build maximized for that, and I'd love to hear it. Number 9. Wood Elf Magic. This is a feat that I really like. This was introduced, I should say the last one too, also introduced in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And this only works for wood elves, but I like this because in my mind, in a build I have in my head, this is a way, without fixing the ranger, you could play a really good ranger without actually having to take any levels in the class. And what this does is you learn a druid cantrip of your choice. You learn the Long Strider spell and the Pass Without Trace spell, and you can cast each one of them once without expending a spell slot, and you get those back on a long rest. Use Wisdom for all 3 of those spells. So this is a way, in my mind, and maybe I'll do a future video where we'll call it the Ranger build, and it'll be building a Ranger without actually having to play that class. And this would be a way to get you some woodlandy magic without actually having to take a level in Ranger. And I think that this could be a lot of fun. Plus, you could get this, and if you wanted to do Magic Initiate, you could get a lot of good druidic magic and have access to a bunch of different stuff without actually having to take levels in Ranger to get it. And I also really like this. Do I wish this also gave you a +1 to your Wisdom? Yes, I do. But that being said, I think it is still a really cool spell, and like Long Strider and Pass Without Trace, Long Strider's not a spell you always are going to prepare. It lasts for an hour non-concentration and just boosts your movement speed. And Pass Without a Trace, while it is concentration, it's a super powerful boon, and you will never be upset to have that, even if it is only once a long rest. Number 8. Abberant Dragonmark was obviously introduced in the Eberron Rising from the Last War book, but I really like this because it is one of the... Oh, here it's also listed as Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron. But it has it's one of the few Constitution boosting feats, which is, there's not many. And it provides you some really interesting benefits for what it is. The only downside of it is you need to be playing with all feats basically on or in an Eberron game. So you learn a cantrip of your choice from the Sorcerer spell list. In addition, you choose a first level spell from the Sorcerer list. You learn that spell and can cast it through your mark. And what's interesting is it's using Constitution as your casting score. And once you cast it, you get it back on a short rest, which is nice. But whenever you cast a first level spell through your mark, you can expend a hit die and roll it. If you roll an even number, you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to that number rolled. And if you roll an odd number, one random creature within 30 feet of you takes force damage equal to the number rolled. If no other creatures are in range, you take that damage. But that's also a nice extra bit, right? It can be a boon for you or extra damage against an enemy. And depending on what sorcerer spell you pick, it could come up pretty consistently. You could choose something like Detect Magic, but you could also choose something like Shield, which will always be useful, even if it is only once a short rest. Once a short rest plus 5 to your AC is a huge benefit. It also has fun, interesting flaws tied to it here. You can see you can generate them randomly, pick one, or roll, or come up with one for your DM, allowing you to then potentially add more interesting role play to your character. And there's this option down here, which is also very interesting, the Greater Abberant Dragonmark. So at the DM's discretion, when you hit level 10, you have a 10% chance of gaining an epic boon from Chapter 7 of the DMG. If you fail to gain an epic boon, you have a 10% chance the next time you gain a level. If you gain a boon, the DM determines it randomly. The character also permanently loses one of their hit dice, and their hit point maximum is reduced by an amount equal to a roll of the die plus their con mod. And this can't be reversed. So it even has a chance to grow even more powerful, and it's just something unique, different, and it also gives you bonus to Constitution. Number 7. Heavily Armored. I know this may seem like a weird choice, but I was never one for Heavy Armor Master because you have to have proficiency with Heavy Armor to get it. So more often than not, when I was looking for a medium armor character to get a strength boost for one reason or another, I would often take Heavily Armored as that feat. I did it with my Old Blood Hunter. I did it with my Unearthed Arcana Hexblade, so I could get a bonus to my strength and then get proficiency with heavy armor. And the only reason this is really on here is because it is one of the strength boosting scores, and then it potentially, or feats rather, but then it can also give you access to heavy armor, which may or may not be useful in your game, right? Like if it is always interesting to me, like you could find a set of magic like plate mail that's super cool, but no one can use it. And then in theory, if you level up, you could take a feat and then boom, now you can use it. And that actually happened to me in a 3-5 game. The DM gave us a super great suit of like super high-end plate mail, and no one in the party could wear plate mail armor. So when we hit level 4 or 3 in that game, I took the feat to give me access to that armor, and then he hated himself for it because he could never hit me. It was a really fun time. So I just have nostalgia for this feat as well. Number 6. Flames of Phlegethos. This is one that is required for you to be a tiefling or a feral tiefling, and this is introduced in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Now, I have actually also unfortunately never gotten a chance to use this feat myself, but I have players and I've played with people who have, and it's always a lot of fun. First of all, it's going to give you a bonus to your intelligence or charisma score, which is nice because it's tied to more being a caster class. But whenever you roll fire damage for a spell that you cast, it does not specify that it needs to use a spell slot, so it can be with a cantrip as well. You can re-roll any one on the fire damage dice, but you must use the new roll even if it's a 1. And then whenever you cast a spell that deals fire damage, you can cause flames to wreathe you until the end of your next turn. They don't harm you or your possessions. They shed bright light out to 30 feet and dim light for another 30 feet, so better than a torch. And while they're present, any creature within 5 feet of you that hits you with a melee attack takes a d4 fire damage. So it's going to give you extra damage, in theory. You're going to be a good light source. It's going to boost your ability score, and it's retributive damage. I know a lot of people like using this in conjunction with Elemental Adept, which allows you to ignore the resistance to fire damage, and then any damage roll of a 1 becomes a 2. So in theory, you have multiple ways to increase the damage that you roll when you use Flames of Phlegethos, as long as you're tiefling, and you can chain feats to really make things an interesting build. And I really like that. Maybe I'll do a build video on that where I do like the most fire tiefling. I don't know. But it's a lot of fun. Like I said, I've never gotten a chance to use this in a character that I've gotten a chance to play, but I think it would be a lot of fun, and especially if they're going to remove and tweak the kind of ability scores or whatever they're going to end up doing with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, this could be a really big boon of a feat. Number 5. Elven Accuracy, as introduced in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. The Unearthed Arcana, I'll be honest with you, was one of my favorite versions, the Unearthed Arcana of this feat. The finished version is still really good, but not as good in my mind. So it's increased your Dex, Intelligence, Wisdom, or you have to be an elf or a half-elf, rather. Increase your Dex, Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma score by 1 to a maximum of 20. And whenever you have advantage on an attack roll using Dexterity, Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma, you can re-roll one of the dice. So that's pretty good, because that's going to really increase your chances of guaranteeing a hit. So if you're rolling a d20, you roll with advantage, roll 2 dice, then you can re-roll one of the other ones and either maybe fish for a crit or turn a potential double miss with advantage into a hit. But the trick is, it says it has to be an attack roll using Dexterity, Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma. The original wording of it didn't specify, so if it was like, if you had advantage, you could roll, again. And I really like the concept of that with an Elven Barbarian, because with an Elven Barbarian using Reckless Attack potentially every turn, you could get advantage, a guaranteed advantage on an attack, and a potential to, you really don't even need to pump points into strength. You could just fish for crits with 3 rolls every time you went to attack. And I thought that was a really cool build concept, but unfortunately it fell apart with the final printing of Elven Accuracy. That being said, if you are an Elven class that can get access to advantage on the regular, whether that be through use of a familiar and the help action, maybe hiding as a rogue, that's a pretty good synergy with that, right? You're an elf rogue, you hide behind a tree, it's a bonus action, attack from cover where you're hidden, you have advantage, you are now rolling 3 dice and potentially increasing that chance for a crit, which you could then use to do a ridiculous amount of sneak attack damage because you were hidden. And then again, potentially maybe if you're a samurai fighter, right, you can use your fighting spirit to gain advantage on attacks. So that's a guaranteed advantage. So you could maybe work funky stuff with that. I do have this, and I have played a class. I am currently playing one that has it. Unfortunately, the amount of times that I've gotten advantage has been relatively minimal. And in doing so, I kind of wish there was another half, dex feat that I could use. One that adds dexterity +1 that I think would be more useful than this. This has been super useful when it comes into play, but for me personally, as a wizard in this game, it has not come into play too often. Number 4. Observant. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, this feat got a lot of use in the early days and even till this date in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, because it was one of the few +1 wisdom feats out there. So it is still useful even if it was only used for that, because it also works for intelligence, which I feel often gets overlooked. But if you can see creatures' mouth and you understand the language that they're speaking, you can read their lips, which has fun roleplay mechanics. But the big one is it also gives you a +5 bonus to your passive perception and your passive investigation. And the kind of benefit of those is that they are, as they state in the name, passive. So if you're not paying attention and things go to try to sneak up on you and your passive perception is really high, you won't be surprised. And this is one of the few ways you can bump up a passive score pretty consistently. There are other ways to do it by like having permanent advantage on certain abilities will give you bonuses to passive scores and things. But for the most part, there isn't many ways to hard and fast increase your passive abilities. and this is one way to do so. Again, as someone who played a lot of wisdom-based classes, and you play Variant Human, you might snag Observant right out the gate as an option to get that extra +1 to Wisdom, since there, at the time especially, there wasn't any +2 Wisdom race. Number 3. Tough. I don't think I really need to explain Tough. It was introduced in the player's handbook, and basically you get 2 hit points for every level you have when you take this, and whenever it is, and it works retroactively as well. So basically, if you play from 1 to 20 and you have Tough, that's an extra 40 hit points you get over that time period. So this can be big. This can be the way to really even out a low Constitution score. This can be a way to take a squishy caster type and turn them into more of a tank, which is nice. As someone who's playing a squishy wizard tank right now, if I had the extra feats to spare and could take Tough, that would be huge for me, because my character would be so much more survivable rather than wading into melee with wizard hit points. So I'm a big fan of Tough. I also like the concept of trying to be a barbarian who, maxes out Constitution, hits level 20, maybe is a dwarf, so they get that extra 1 hit point per level, and then also gets Tough, so they just have a ridiculous amount of hit points and they can just take anything that you can throw at them. I find that really interesting. I realize Tough's not that flashy, but I do enjoy it. Number 2. Infernal Constitution. Yet again, a racial feat for the Tieflings, introduced in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And this, in my mind, is what all, feats, especially racial feats, should be measured against. Because I think this is one of the the pinnacle, one of the best designed ones out there. So it's going to increase your Constitution score by 1, which again, as we've discussed, there's not a ton of Constitution boosting feats out there. So this is going to help it, although it is restricted again to being Tiefling or Feral Tiefling. But you get resistance to cold and poison damage from taking this feat, and advantage on saving throws against being poisoned. I will remind you that base Tiefling has fire resistance. So for this one feat, you now have cold resistance, fire resistance, poison resistance, and advantage on saving throws against poison. I can speak to having this as my Tiefling character Temerity from my Evil campaign. We were granted a feat at first level, and I had an odd Constitution score. So this put me to a nice even 16 Constitution, and I am now resistant to fire, cold, and poison, and I recently got myself a magic item, magic armor, that gave me resistance to lightning. So I super enjoy that, being resistant to fire, cold, lightning, and poison damage. Those are 4 of the most common types of damage out there. And that makes me be that much more survivable. Like I said, I think this is really one of the pinnacles of a feat creation in 5th edition, and I think that all other feats should be measured to a degree as how does it stack compared to Infernal Constitution. Number 1. And lastly, what I would consider one of the most versatile and most useful feats in all of 5th edition is Resilient. This is a choose an ability score of your choice, increase that ability score by 1, and then you also gain proficiency in saving throws using that ability. The amount of characters I've had that have Resilient in some form or another are probably just about all of them. So, it's always interesting when you maybe start with a different, maybe you multi-class or something, like for instance, my wizard that I was talking about before. He's a tank and he's squishy, but he started with a level of fighter, so that gives him strength and constitution saving throws proficiency. Wizards typically get wisdom saving throw proficiencies, and that will be something pretty useful for me because my character doesn't have the best wisdom, so gaining that proficiency bonus to wisdom saving throws could be really big. Again, that was also a very common one for variant humans, to put a +1 in wisdom and then take resilient wisdom to get proficiency in a wisdom saving throw and boost their wisdom up by 2. The only classes that really don't benefit from Resilient, I guess probably the only one really, is Monk. Because eventually, if you're going to play your Monk long enough, you will get proficiency in every saving throw out there. I think that comes on at like level 14. So there's a little bit of a downside to that for the Monk. They're not ever going to get, they could take Resilient earlier on until they hit level 14, but once they get there, it won't be useful for them anymore. So maybe a nice DM will let you retrain that into something else, but otherwise you could basically used it for when you need it, and now you're proficient in everything. Extra proficiencies also goes a long way if you happen to have a paladin in the party who has adding their charisma modifier to everybody's saving throws. That can really put these numbers super high. I also am a big fan of a resilient constitution for a lot of spellcasters, because that will increase your concentration check ability, also increasing your constitution to give you more hit points. So with constitution saving throw proficiency, the chances of you failing a concentration check significantly lower. And again, it's just a really this, I guess, alongside of, Infernal Constitution, I think is another one of the cream of the crop of feats in 5th edition. Like, this is exceptionally well done. It's so simple, yet so powerful and well done. So anyway, folks, that is my top 10 feats for 5th edition. That's as it stands right now, as of the 8th of September. Things, again, may change when Tasha's Cauldron of Everything comes out. But I don't know. I went through these, and I'm sure a lot of you are like, what? Lucky's not on the list? I don't like Lucky as a feat. I'm not a huge fan of it. I don't have anything against it. I don't outlaw my players from using it if they want to. It's just every time Lucky comes up, I feel like it really slows everything down. Because it's like, oh, hang on, no, I'm going to reroll that. Or, oh, hang on, no, wait, you reroll that. And Lucky just slows the combat and slows the game down. Not in every campaign, I recognize that, and not with every group. But in my experience, it does cause a slowdown. And I also feel like more often than not, when my players have it, I'll tell them what the thing is, and they're like, well, I'm going to use Lucky and reroll it. And technically, I told them, so I don't know. I'm just not a fan of it, and it's weird how it also interacts with the DM. It can make the DM reroll. So I'm not a huge fan of Lucky, and I've never really gotten a chance to use Sharpshooter or Great Weapon Master to any effect with any character, so I can't really speak to how great they are. I've seen them used occasionally, and I know that they are very powerful, but until I'm able to use them myself, they just don't really have a place on this list. So let me know what your favorite feat is in 5th edition. Was it on my list? Is it something different? I want to know. Let me know in the comments down below, and let me know why it's your favorite feat. So anyway, thank you again to my patrons over on Patreon for continuing to support me and the channel. There is still a giveaway going on for a limited edition copy of Mythic Odysseys of Theros. We've got about 1 week left, so you may want to jump on that sooner rather than later. I will see you all next time.